There's something rather fishy about Mondo. This is your look at the Mondo Masters of the Universe Mer-Man Ocean Warlord 6-scale figure, Mondo exclusive. By the power of Grayskull, you too can have the power. Mondo is proud to bring to you their next figure in their Masters of the Universe 1/6 scale line, Mer-Man, featuring 30 points of articulation, fishy eyes, sea-powered armor, and a lot of accessories. This is the most powerfully fishy figure you'll ever find from here to Eternia's oceans. The Mondo exclusive version includes an interchangeable alternate portrait and a spear containing the Crimson Pearl. Now, before we get a closer look at Mer-Man, the first thing we're going to want to do is figure out how tall the figure actually stands. While I'm doing that, I'd also like to send out a big Eternian thank you to the folks over at Mondo, who provided the sample of Mer-Man that we're having a look at right now. If you'd like to pick the figure up for yourself, the good news is Mondo still has it available on their website. You can head on over to their site. I'll provide the link down below in the video description, and you can order your very own Mer-Man for yourself. The figure stands 12.7 inches in height, and we'll switch that quickly to centimeters, revealing that the figure of Mer-Man stands 32.2, a little over 32 centimeters in height. For some size comparisons, let's bring in some previously looked at Mondo Masters. There is, of course, Skeletor, and we'll also bring in Faker. I didn't bring in He-Man simply just because I figured it would be a better comparison to show you guys how all the bad guys stack up with one another. Notably, although they are sharing the same body, and I mean really, they follow the same suit that the original Masters figures had, notorious for using the same body, but it just goes to show how much of this does change by coloring out, of course, the main body and changing out the armor. Not to mention, I do also want to point out that Mer-Man has one fantastic head sculpt. He actually has one of 3 different head sculpts. Other than that, I mean, the figures are pretty much the same, but because he does have that crest around his neck, and because his head is a little bit higher, Mer-Man does appear to be slightly taller than both Faker and Skeletor on either side of him. Those are really good figures. If you guys have not had the chance yet to check out my reviews of the various Mondo Masters of the Universe, do yourself a service and do check those out, especially if you're a big He-Man fan. They're really producing some incredible looking 6-scale figures, the tallest He-Man figures around. Let's have a look at the display stand that comes included with Mer-Man. If you are rather familiar with the Masters line from Mondo, then you sort of know what to expect now with the display stand. It's a contoured, shaped stand, breaking the mold of your traditional squares and rectangles, favoring something that sort of looks like a rock face, until of course you flip it around, and on the back you're treated to the M, likely for Mondo and technically for Masters. I mean, these are good looking stands. I have mentioned in the past, though, I'll reiterate it now for Mer-Man, I feel like the stand is just slightly small. I'm alright and down with the idea of keeping the shape as it is, but I would almost even make the stand bigger, because if you really look at it paired up with Mer-Man's feet, the figure just barely fits the stand. It shows well for display pieces, but I mean, certainly if you did want to put, say, Mer-Man in a more dynamic looking pose, I feel like the stand is just a little too small. I would actually just take that stand and bring it out just a little bit, even just like another foot space on either side, just to make that stand just a little bit bigger. It's nice to be able to display these figures on stands, especially for Mer-Man specifically, because I find the top of the figure is a little top-heavy. You probably can understand why. The amount of vast sculpting on armor that he's got on the top torso does make the figure a little bit more top-heavy. I will definitely be making use of the display stand, so I'm always happy the fact that they include them. I'm just merely saying that I think the stand could be probably just 1/2 size bigger, enough to accommodate not only him just standing in a museum pose like this, but certainly if you also wanted to put Mer-Man in any sort of dynamic action poses as well. Now, for the figure's accessories, I figured we would tackle first the ones that come included with the Mondo exclusive. So this is the one, if you do get the Mondo exclusive, these are the things that are only going to be with this figure. And then all the other accessories that we're going to be looking at in a second will all come with the standard release. If that makes sense. I will say, though, the things they've thrown in for the exclusive and generally across the board, all of the Mondo exclusives when it comes to the master figures have really come with some top-notch accessories. So I would say if you're starting to pick these up for yourself, try to see if you can source out the Mondo exclusives first, because you'll see some of the cool accessories that come included with these ones. Okay, so let's have a first look at his spear. Now again, this is only with the Mondo exclusive release. As you can see, it's not just the spear itself, but lodged in the blade, the actual pointed part of the spear, lodged in there is the Crimson Pearl. Real nice touch to see that they would have included this. As you can see, living up to its namesake, the Crimson Pearl is a nice crimson red. And you can see it's been sculpted right into the actual point of the spear itself. I mean, of course, we could spend some time and discuss just the spear tip, but there's really a whole lot of extra cool details that they put actually into the spear itself. You can see the wrappings that they've put around the top of the handle, and some real interesting woven decorative work that they've put along the top there as well. The majority of this spear, as you can see, is all done in brown. There's all these little notches and parts to it that are missing. So I like the fact that there's a little bit of wear and tear to it. So you can really see the amount of little notches that they've actually put into the spear handle itself. A really nice touch. I'm so thrilled the fact that they actually include the Crimson Pearl. We're going to put that to the side. The other thing he comes included with, and a good strong contender for perhaps why you would want to pick up the Mondo exclusive for yourself, is he does also come with an alternate portrait, which I could probably best describe as sort of being the animated style of Mer-Man. Whether you enjoyed the early 2000s He-Man or the original Filmation released He-Man, this is sort of more closer to what we would expect to see Mer-Man looking like. Now, he comes with 3 head portraits if you do get the Mondo exclusive release. This is, again, the one that comes with that version. The standard release is going to be looking with the head sculpt that we're going to be looking at in a second, as well as his classic Masters Mer-Man figure head sculpt. So again, I just want to show you guys what this one looks like. I really do like the details that they added to this one. Now, initially, when I got this out of the box, I was really leaning closer to the idea of displaying the figure with this particular head sculpt because I really like the way that it works. Looks, at least. As it goes for working components, it does actually have an open and closed mouth. You can see it's got a little hinge on either side corner. So I do like the fact that that does open and close. A little loose on this figure, but I still love the fact that he does have an open and closed mouth. Very, very cool. I'm going to bring this one back in when we examine closely the other head portraits that come included with Mer-Man, because I definitely want to show you guys the comparison with all of them. But you can see some really stunning sculpt on the back, and I do like the airbrushing that they also added to it as well. It's this real dark green. I'd almost describe it almost like a really dark teal green, as it's got like a little bit of bluish tint to it. Really nice, stunning work of this additional airbrushing that they've added in the guild areas of his head. You can see it on both sides. So again, like this kind of comes across a little bit more like his animation style of Mer-Man. You'll see how this changes quite quickly to the other head sculpts that we're going to be looking at in a second. Initially, again, like when I got this out of the box, this one was probably going to be the head sculpt that I'm going to go with. Although, fair enough, I actually am warming up to the head sculpt that comes included default with the standard release as well. Okay, so now that those are done, these are the accessories that's going to come included with the figure if you get yourself the standard release. And again, just getting the standard on its own, you'll see in a second how much stuff Mondo packs with these figures. Very clear it was the case when we also had a look at the turtles from Mondo as well. How many things they actually pack with these figures is incredible. Let's have a look at the accessories. I sort of think that we should start with the smallest and we'll work our way up. Included with Mer-Man, he gets himself the Hand Blaster. Now, they call this, according to the read-up on their site, as Hand Blaster V2. I don't know if that actually means version 2. Whatever it is, it definitely does look like a very neat-looking handgun that he could be carrying around with him. Although, to be fair, the other cool stuff that he comes included with probably will be nudging, I think, the blaster out of the equation when it comes to displaying the figure. You can see that the defaulted plastic probably was like a very dark gray. And then what they've done over top of it is they've dry brushed this really nice metallic silver to fill not only the crevices in, but to also make it look like it's got some age and wear and tear to it. It is a really nice looking gun. Again, probably not going to be displaying it with the figure, but I do appreciate the fact when we do get as many accessories as we do with all of these Masters releases. Let's have a look at his trident next. Really, again, some stunning sculpt to this. You can sort of imagine how he would have crafted this. Now, I don't suspect this would be a living creature, but it probably was living at one point. He literally has just crafted this out of shells and things that he found around. I do like the fact that it does have more of the organic look to it. And sort of with the color scheme, it really does keep to a very organic nature. Even right down to the bottom where it's got that twisted sort of, I don't know if it would be a snail shell, but something, definitely, again, something from at the bottom of the depths of Eternian's oceans. I do like also the fact that there's these vines wrapping around it. It's all primarily done in yellow, but then you get these little touches of green that break that up rather nicely. I do like the fact that it's got all these little spikes along the edge. They're not certainly sharp enough that you're going to hurt yourself when you put your fingers against it, but you will notice that they're there. Yes, you will notice that they're there. Some nice additional dry brushing of a darker brown to the surface so that, again, all that stunning sculpt pops and stands out on the trident. Really like the look of this one. Now, again, I could be a strong contender for what I'm going to display with the figure, but I have to sort of feel like I want to go OG when it comes to Mer-Man. And that's, of course, have a look at his Mer sword. You could call it anything you really wanted. When I was a kid, and I still feel to this day, it somehow reminds me of a cob of corn, really flattened out cob of corn. Although when you, to be fair, looking at this one, I feel it comes across a little less like a cob of corn and more like just a row of teeth. And something unsettling, I have to admit, by looking at a sword that's got multiple rows of teeth. And as you can see, each one of the teeth, each individual tooth is sculpted different from the one next to it. Sort of a really gruesome, gory looking, almost like a snowflake. Every one is different. Every individual tooth is different from the last. Again, you got some nice coloring that's been added to it. So the coloring of the teeth are sort of more like an ivory color with a tint of yellow. But then they've also grind those up by adding that additional wash of brown to each of the individual teeth. Not to mention the middle section, which always come across more to me again like the cob of corn. I always called it the cob sword. Or did I call it the corn sword? I don't remember what I called things when I was a kid. It's been certainly so long ago. Looking at the hilt of the sword, as you can see, it's actually made up of a bone, and that's a really nice touch. I mean, you got to imagine like the whole thing would have, again, been crafted from either creatures he's killed, creature carcasses he's found, and all the things that he's found at the bottoms of the sea, he would have just made into all the weapons that you see with the figure. I really do like the touch. Taking, again, that initial silly sword that I could have called a corn sword when I was younger, they have crafted in such a way that it looks far, far removed from being a corn, and definitely more closer to looking just like a gross set of road teeth. And I really like the way that this turned out. He also includes a series of interchangeable hands. Let's have a look at those right now. Different hands, different gestures. He comes with a pair of hands for grabbing and holding onto things. And there's actually a couple of variations to this. The more just defaulted grabbing hands, good for holding the sword, good for holding, of course, the trident or the blaster. He comes with just like regular gripping hands. Look at the long nails. Let me just draw everyone's attention. Everybody, please, please look at the long nails on Mer-Man. Very, very cool. I also like, again, that additional coloring that I'm probably going to mention this a lot when we're looking at this particular figure, because not only is there a lot of sculpt going on with this figure, but there's a lot of cool colors added as well. But even just getting a sneak peek of that, you can see that kind of dark purple color that they've added to the skin of just his hands and his hands alone. Again, he comes with grabbing hands. He comes with a variation to that where you can see these are a little bit better suited for holding like the blaster, for example. So go ahead and just fit that into his hand. The hands are of a tighter plastic, a little bit more rigid plastic, but it's more than enough still to have him holding the gun in his hand. And you can see they're actually trigger hands. So the finger is sitting, resting comfortably, ready to fire the trigger. He also comes included with a bunch of gestured hands as well. Best way I could probably describe these as gestured hands or swimming hands, I suppose, as well. And he comes with variations of that. Comes with this set, and he also comes with this set as well. which is just a slight variation to it. There's a little fibrous hair here. Let me just pull that off. I don't know why that ended up there. It's floating in the wind. There we go, pulling it off. Must have came from the plastic. But as you can see, there's a slight variation to these gestured hands. They're a little bit more closed in, I suppose, if you want to compare it to the, where's the other hands here? Let's grab those other hands. Comparing it to like these ones, as you can see, these form slightly more of a grip. Good for the sword, but I mean, really, they're too big of a hand for the sword. So the sword's only really going to be sitting inside of it, just barely holding on to it. So these, again, are probably more just gestured hands. Or I always like the idea if you're going to be having your hands relaxed. Like, say, for example, you've got the figure holding, let's just go with the corn sword. I know it's not really its name. The other hand, if you're going to have the arm just draped down, I mean, I just like to get maybe like a hand like this, just draping down, as opposed to just giving him a fist. Fist gets so boring after a while. You definitely would want to be going with a little bit more of a gestured hand. Love the webbing in between the fingers, by the way. That's also a really nice touch. The other thing, speaking of nice touches, comes included with Mer-Man. He comes with a pair of swimming feet. Now, you'll see their swimming feet by the placement of the ball joints. They're further back, so instead of actually going straight up, they go slight off to the side. Now, if you were to put this on the figure, basically you would have Mer-Man following that same angle. He would be laying down on the job. But ideally, if you do have the figure in a swimming pose, which I probably would suggest using a different display stand, or maybe if you could possibly, let's just grab the display stand again. If you could pull this part out and swap it for something that's got like a cradle support, enough and strong enough you could rest the figure on top of, then that would be ideal for displaying the figure in a swimming pose. I don't think by the weight of the figure it's going to be enough on the stand itself. I don't think it's going to be strong enough to hold him laying down. So I do like, again, the fact that they include the swimming feet, but I think for the fact that the figure is going to be laying down for that, or you're going to be slightly, well, he's not going to be standing, essentially. It's going to be harder to pull that off with that style of stand. You may even find yourself wanting to suspend him, maybe from your shelf. Probably that could be an idea that you could consider as well. But those are the accessories that come included with Mer-Man. Ideally, my favorite of the batch still has to be the corn sword. I don't even remember what I called it. I think I even called it as a kid a corn cob sword. Definitely doesn't look like a corn cob. That being said, let's have a look at the interchangeable head sculpts now that come included with Mer-Man. Okay, so first checking out the head sculpt that comes with the figure when you get him immediately out of the box. That's a great looking head sculpt. More of a modern take of Mer-Man, I feel. Moving him to the side and bringing in the Mondo exclusive so you can see the difference between the two. You know, initially, I would have just jumped the chance at maybe displaying the figure with this head sculpt because it looked more like his cartoon counterpart. And yet, now I'm putting the two side by side and I've spent a little more time looking with the figure. I really do like the take on this one because it does give him that same still Mer-Man vibe, but it gives them a much more modernized look. Either one of them, again, great looking head sculpts. Some of the best I've seen from the Masters line from Mondo. But again, it really was so quick to go with this one. And now again, the more I'm looking at them side to side, the more I'm really liking the design of the Mondo, the initial modern Mondo head sculpt. Now to change out the head sculpt, one last thing just before I don't want to overlook this point. He does have a moving mouth, just like the Mondo exclusive. To change out the head sculpt, you're just going to grab the head here. And one thing you will want to be careful of is when you pull this off, this neck piece is a separate piece. You can sort of understand how this would have been the main defaulted body for the regular Mondo Master figures. And then all they've done is just sculpted an extra piece for Mer-Man. And that just sits very comfortably just on the neck like so. We can go ahead and replace it with the cartoon version of Mer-Man, or sort of, again, a cartoon design of the character. The ball joints are, I will say, quite large, and you may even, the first couple of times that you do this, consider the idea of slightly heating up the socket of the head, because it did take me quite a bit to get the head sculpt in place. It's harder for me, of course, to do it when I'm doing it with my camera behind the camera, but it kind of gives you an idea of how that cartoon version of Mer-Man looks, or the exclusive looks, next to the defaulted head sculpt. Now you can see what I mean, how torn and conflicted I was as to which head sculpt I'd actually go with. I really like this one, but I'm kind of warming a little bit more, I think, up to this design instead. The other thing, like with other Mondo releases, they also include the classic, the original Masters of the Universe Mer-Man design. It definitely doesn't read when you look at it more and more. It doesn't really look like Mer-Man. It never really did. I see that, I think Stinkor. I don't think Mer-Man, because I think they used a similar head sculpt. This one doesn't have the open and closed mouth. It's just literally just a molded piece of plastic. And if you so preferred the design of your Mer-Man to look a little bit more rooted to his classic toy design, then by all means go this route. I mean, not downplaying it at all. I just like the more modern design of these characters. They did put quite a bit of paint in even just the classic head sculpt. So there's a lot of good stuff going on, even just with the classic head design. Even though, again, it never really read as Mer-Man for me, certainly even as a kid and as an adult now especially. So again, I'm not really sure which head sculpt I'm going to go with. I like this one, but I think I'm still going to probably settle on going with this head sculpt for the time being. And that's the beauty of these figures as well, is the fact that because you do have those alternate options available, you can display your Mer-Man looking like this the first time around. There we go, getting his head back in place. You can decide to display him looking like this one day, and then the next day decide for yourself that you want to have Mer-Man looking a little more closer like this. You have both head sculpts available, and you can swap those out at any given time. Just before we look at the rest of the figure, though, just one last time looking at that head sculpt. Is that not just one of the coolest head sculpts you've ever seen for a Mer-Man? Again, he does have the open and closed mouth, so you can open and close that if you want. A little series of teeth. They look like little tiny chiclets from one side of his mouth to the other side. And again, that does open and close. Those are great looking eyes, though. Love the coloring, which I guess could best be described as sort of a teal-based green. And you've got all that airbrushing of purple done all in the gilled areas here. Would that still be gills, or would those just be simply fins on the sides of his head? I'll leave it to you to decide. Again, a nice touch on their part to incorporate that collar piece, because if not for that, it would lose a little bit, I feel, by using just the regular buck body, the regular defaulted Master's body. If they had kept it right there and didn't continue the trend of that sculpt further past his head, it would stand out. I'm really happy to see that they included that extra collar piece. But you really want to talk sculpting on this guy. I mean, get a good look at this. It literally looks like his mouth has been engulfed by a giant skeletal fish. The bottom of the teeth here at the bottom of his collar. And of course, a set of teeth right around the top area there as well. I mean, kind of looking like it, even if you look at the back of it, it actually kind of looks like a big, giant ocean, almost like a reptile, that would have tried to swallow up Mer-Man, and he's literally now turned it into his body armor. It's got some incredible looking detail to it. Now, I was a big fan of all the ones we've looked at, the He-Man, the Skeletor, the Fakor, but I feel like of all the ones, this is the one that really caught my attention the most, because there's a lot of stuff going on here. Even if you look at the coloring here, it's sort of this very light honey yellow, but then they've added all this additional airbrushing of this dark golden brown right in the center area there, and it's everywhere really. Even like the collar piece as well has been afforded all this additional coloring, and it really adds a lot of contrast to it. As I said, basically, all the body is the same Master's body as we've seen with everything else. So it just goes to show how much more creative they can get with the designs of these characters by just adding all the extra layers over top of it, adding the additional armor on not only his arms, but of course the main piece on his torso. I love the little fins there on the sides. This is dense plastic too. It has very little give to it. I mean, it's not enough to where if you're moving the figure, for example, it's going to limit his articulation. We'll talk about that in a second, but I really could spend a whole lot of time talking about how much stuff is going on the sculpting of this figure. Little tiny shells strung down from his belt, for example. The scales that he has on his actual trunks. Now, you could, I think, remove this. I feel like you probably could feed this down off of his waist, but I don't really know why you would want to completely take that off. I mean, underneath it technically is a regular traditional belt. If you did want to disassemble, I suppose, some of this, you could probably get it down, stripped down to basics, closer to his original toy counterparts. So again, I like the option that there is a traditional belt underneath that, but I can't see myself ever wanting to take this off. Ever keep this in a box, it doesn't deserve to be in a box. It deserves to be on the figure, and it deserves to be on display. Nice stunning work there, even on the side gauntlets that he's got on his arms, for example. Again, they all look organic, like he's killed these things and turned their husked body into things that he can put then on his body. Spinning it around the back of the figure, again, you've got some great, glorious color. I really like this as well. The scales are done what looks almost to be in an orange color, and then they've just tipped the end in a silver. So you got a nice contrast of the silvers against the backdrop of the orange. Moving down to the bottom of the figure, we're having a look at his shin guards, just as detailed as the gauntlets that were on his arm. You can see like it's made up of these little tiny shells and things that probably organically started growing on his armor. I love the fact that they also added this additional, you can see it right there. It's almost like a blue. They look like they've added it wet and just let it dry, but it just adds a little bit of additional much needed color. That color actually happens to be also here up on the fins, around his arm gauntlets as well. Now, these are, again, not sharp to the touch, but I do like the fact that they have like nice solid points to them. He has that quite a bit actually on the back of his legs there as well. And of course, down to the bottom, we've got ourselves the traditional looking Mer-Man feet. And I'm just going to bring in for a second, I'm going to move all my stuff out of the way here and bring Skeletor in, because I'm sure somebody would be asking, is it the same feet for Skeletor as it is for Mer-Man? And it looks like they could have started somewhere with the same idea, but it's not quite the same feet. You can see Mer-Man's largest toe seems like it's bigger. This one right here. Seems like it's actually bigger than Skeletor's. Mer-Man has just slightly bigger feet. And of course, the big noted call as well that he does have the webbing in between his toes, which obviously Skeletor never even had in the first place. So let's have a look at the posability on Mer-Man. His head is on a ball joint. We've already discussed that before. And I already mentioned this also already. I love the fact that they added that collar piece. So it adds a consistency when it comes to the sculpt from the head all the way down to, well, right here. He does have the ball joint, so you can have the head looking down. You can have the head looking up. You would probably think that the back collar piece would really limit being able to bring his head back. But in actual fact, that's as far back as the head can actually go. If you push it any further past that point, the head is notorious for popping off the ball joint, just because that's the full range that the head will allow you to go. I suppose you could still get it to the point where if the head's looking up this much, you can still get him in a swimming pose. Again, I'm probably going to be using a different means other than a display stand, or if I can find a different cradle support, because I don't feel like it would be strong enough to hold the weight of the figure, just because these figures have some noted weight to them. Oh, the head does pivot back and forth like that. You can rotate it all the way around, technically all the way around. Of course, a lot of that is going to start rubbing up against each other, and you don't want to start flaking the paint in any way. I know we've already talked about this, but the mouth does open and close. If we open it completely, did I even show you the tongue? If I didn't, there it is right there. A nice tongue done in that same rusted brown that the rest of his gums are on the front. Really liking the look of those. As for his arms hinge out a full 90-degree angle bend. Let's just straighten out the arms so you guys can see. Full 90-degree angle right there. You can bring the arms forward, you can bring the arms back. I mentioned already that these scales are a denser plastic. The edges are slightly more softer, but there's quite a bit of denser plastic further in. It does limit a little bit of the posability, only to the sense that you can't rotate the arm all the way around. I know that's usually like you want to be able to do that with the figure, but when you come to displaying the figure, why would you want to display him any further past this point, any further past this point? Even when it comes to him holding his trident, yeah, okay, maybe if you want to bring the trident further up, it would limit a little bit of that because this fin is sticking out here, these scales. But he does have a bicep swivel there. He has a single hinge on the elbow. And actually, when you look at the back of the figure here, it kind of looks like he should have a double hinge elbow, but in actual fact, it only hinges here. This part is actually ball joints to the shoulder. This part where his bicep and tricep is, this actually is just a piece that goes over top. So essentially, this slides onto the bicep. This slides onto the shoulder, I should say. And then the arm with the elbow, the ball joint attaches underneath this to the shoulder. And then, like I said, this is just in the middle of things. So even though it looks like it technically should have a double hinge, he only actually has a single hinge. Class is dismissed. The hands rotate all the way around, whatever hands you decide to go with, and they technically can hinge back and forth as well. As for his torso, it's the same as what we've seen with other Masters figures. Not only does the waist swivel back and forth, but you can also, he does have the ball joint, so you can move that all the way around like that. Just be careful. Just please be careful, especially this area here around this section of his belt. If you are moving the torso piece, you want to make sure that you're not clipping it or the armor isn't clipping it up here, that you could break this off because it looks like it's just glued in place. As for the legs split out. I don't know why I always feel the need to show you guys the inner workings of the figure, but there's a ball joint right there and there's a ball joint right there. Quite large ones too, quite large, nasty ones. It allows the top of the thigh to swivel. And of course you can move the legs back and forth out all the normal ways. And unlike the arms, which are a little bit more limited articulation, Mer-Man actually has a double hinge on the knee. One there and one there. As for his foot articulation, he does have the traditional ankle pivot. I know some people really enjoy their ankle pivots, so he does have that. It hinges up and down, and you could technically rotate those feet all the way around. The thing you will want to be careful, though, is it scrapes the paint, because it's going to be rubbing against the bottom of the calf guard. So you will definitely want to be careful of that. Just putting down the figure here, getting him all firmly planted. Let's bring in, again, some of the figures that we've looked at before, at least the bad guys. We can bring in Faker. There he is right there. And we can bring in, of course, Skeletor. Skeletor isn't one that normally stands in the back. But in this case, because the review, of course, is all around, centered around Mer-Man, he'll take the back seat for the time being, just for the time being. Even though, again, like all these figures are making use of the exact same mold, like the original traditional toy line that this line is based from, it goes to show, again, what you can do with different color swaps and different armor, making them all unique to one another. For final looks, I'm displaying the Masters of the Universe Mer-Man 6-scale figure displayed with the alternate Mondo head sculpt instead. Just because I spent a lot of time talking about the defaulted head sculpt, I want to show a little bit of love for this great-looking head sculpt. I guess you could consider this one to be a little bit more cartoon accurate. Although, to be fair, I do want to say it's not cartoon accurate exactly. Neither the 2000 Mer-Man nor the original Filmation Mer-Man looked like this, but it looks a little bit more like a cartoon version of Mer-Man versus the defaulted head sculpt. Of course, there is also the other toy-based head sculpt that comes included with both the standard and the exclusive release. If you decide you want to display your Mer-Man looking a little bit more like his original figure, I love the fact that Mondo includes those original head sculpts. Personally, I never really liked the head sculpt on Mer-Man. I always thought it looked so much better for Stinkor. Never really worked so well for Mer-Man. Speaking of this head sculpt also as well, while I think I'm still going to settle the idea of displaying my figure with the original defaulted head sculpt, I think this particular head sculpt would work exceptionally well if they were to re-release this Mer-Man all done in blue. Because remember, the original Filmation He-Man Master of the Universe cartoon, Mer-Man was blue. He wasn't green. And while they have released a Mer-Man as a convention exclusive that had more psychedelic colors to it, I don't think up to this point they've actually released a all-blue Mer-Man. It may have had something to do with the fact that Skeletor and Faker are already blue. They probably wanted to keep to more the original toy colors and not go so much the colors of the Filmation cartoon. But I feel like this particular head sculpt would lend well to the idea of releasing this guy again in an all-blue color scheme. Of course, the armor would likely stay the same. They could probably even brighten it ever so slightly, but just keep the rest of his body blue, and you've got somewhat a close proximity to the way he looks in the Filmation cartoon. The thing about these figures right now is the fact that they are super reasonably in price. You can actually find Mer-Man right now over on Mondo's website. I'll provide the link down below in the video description. These figures are going for about $175 when you initially pick them up. You may be paying a little bit more for them after the fact if you're having to pick them up on eBay or other sites. But Mer-Man right now is available over on Mondo's website for $175. Ask yourself the last time you were able to get a figure that had this many accessories with this much detail for $175. Again, I'll provide the link down below. A big thank you to the folks over at Mondo who provided this sample of the Mondo exclusive Masters of the Universe Mer-Man that we had a look at in this review. Weigh in your thoughts down below. What do you guys think of this figure? And also let me know which head sculpt you would decide to display if you pick up this figure for yourself. Also, if you're new to the channel and you're liking the content you're seeing on a regular basis, because we are posting regular videos, but let's just say you have yet to hit that subscribe button down below. Don't postpone to another day what you could pull off and accomplish right now. Hit that subscribe button down below, turn the bell notification on, and keep your peepers peeled to this channel, because Monday to Friday, 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when you'll find new videos popping up. Yes, Monday to Friday, 2 times a day. This guy never takes a break. Also, if you get a chance and you ever have some time on your hands at that 2 p.m. and 12 p.m., I reversed it, 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time premieres we also have. So if you want to stop by and chat with fellow collectors, as of course we're having a look at the figures themselves, come by to the channel Monday to Friday, 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Lots of stuff coming your way. If you guys also want to go back and have a look at my other Mondo's Masters of the Universe figures, there's a playlist for not only Mondo, but also the Mondo Masters of the Universe figure line as well. Like I said, there's lots of stuff coming your way, guys. So as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.